Okay, guys, as I was mentioning just off camera there, I want to do a quick little review. About a year, I don't know, maybe almost 2 years, it was 2023, we did a session on weight loss drugs because the GLP-1s were just really coming on board with their new FDA approval for weight loss. So instead of just tackling something that was in the news but without a lot of research, I wanted to kind of go through a little bit of a history. So I'm going to pull some things from that review, but you could go into our playlist on YouTube, the Diet Doc. You could find the research reviews, and then there's one called The Science of Weight Loss Drugs 2020-23. Um, I think the reason I have some question marks here is I think this is how the first pharmacological interventions came about. But originally, all the way back into the 70s and maybe prior, there were some amphetamine-based appetite suppressants. Some of these were even over the counter. Of course, the ones that were big pharma driven were things like fen-phen. Um, gosh, I can't even remember some of the other ones. I think that was the original big one. Then along came some of the behavioral-based interventions, looking at things like the drugs used for depression, dependence, things like that. Again, I have these more listed out in that particular research review if you want that information. But then we got into some of the digestive or mechanistic ones, things that were attempting to block absorption of certain micro and macronutrients. Then we got into the diabetic medications. Metformin and some other ones became very popular, almost as side tangents, just like the GLPs did, where they just noticed, hey, these things that we're using for blood glucose control with diabetics and pre-diabetics were happening to cause some weight loss. So now, of course, this huge boon with peptides, and I just yesterday posted a research brief. We do it in these posts called the Diet IQ, um, on our social media channels. And I showed that they had done a research study on using GLP-1s for binge eating disorder, where currently the only FDA approved one is more of a behavior-based medication, actually Vyvanse. So again, probably you could classify that as a bit of an amphetamine, something that tackles your focus neurologically. And that's really all that is there for binge eating. And they showed that the GLP-1s just smashed the daylights out of the effectiveness for binge eating. Uh, all of that just as a sidebar, but it created some discussion, and I guess I wasn't expecting it. I was surprised that somebody kind of attacked me. What? You're advocating for these drugs? What are you doing? GLP-1s, why would you promote something so positive about them? And you have to understand that, first of all, a GLP-1 is a peptide, meaning it's a naturally occurring substrate in your body, very akin to hormones. Matter of fact, one entire class of hormones are peptides. So as a chemical messenger, at least we start out with something that's in our bodies. Our bodies are used to it. I'm not going to necessarily call that a natural thing because taken in a dose that's just much, much higher or something that could be blocking the uptake of something like an SSRI, it does create a homeostatic rebound. There is an effect. So there are side effects to be worried about. There are a lot of things I want to talk about as we get toward the end. Most importantly, the sustainability of these things. But I think you're going to be surprised where research is going with this class of drugs, what it can accomplish. And I think there's a middle ground where you'll see that these can be incredibly powerful, useful tools, but they're definitely not a miracle. They're not going to take care of everything. So the semaglutides, as one particular class, they are created in the small intestine. One of the mechanisms of action is on the baroreception of information. So when you take this glucagon-like peptide, and glucagon as well as GLP as well as GIP produced in your pancreas released, that one of the major mechanisms of action of the GLP-1 is a baroreceptor mediation where you just feel full. It slows down. Even if you eat a small meal, it slows down gastric emptying, and you get a little bit of a hacked feeling of just being full. You know, you ate this much and you feel like there's this much in your stomach. Then there is some effect to the regulation of blood glucose. It literally does promote insulin being produced. It hacks the hypothalamus hunger cue mechanism. It gets in all parts of your brain, so even impulsiveness, compulsion. That's why they're finding other forms of addiction. You know, a gambling addiction, a shopping addiction, things like that can be impacted. If you have not seen the new Jim Gaffigan comedy special called Skinny, I think it's on Hulu. Really good because he did take a GLP-1 and he's lost a significant amount of weight. So he shows up on stage. You know, he's always been known for being a very, overweight guy. And now he's thin. And so the first 15 or 20 minutes of his bits, his set is all about that. And he makes this joke. Gosh, here I've been this, fat guy all of my life, and all I needed was a shot in the stomach that sucks all of the passion out of my soul. Uh, and there's a little bit of a grain of truth in that. I'm not saying that these drugs are bad or extreme in that way, but those kinds of impulsive things that you may, battle with, or you may think are fun and exciting, whichever side you're on, it does kind of tamp that down. So you just feel like you have more control. So, um, lot you can go in there if you want to, just reading on the mechanisms of action and so forth. But one of the things I wanted to pull out of my first review a year or two ago is the fact that, of course, there are side effects noted, and some of the percentages are rather high. But I personally probably have interacted with maybe 20 people actively taking GLP-1s, and I've just never seen any of these yet. But of course, GI distress, stomach paralysis, vomiting, pancreatitis is huge. One of the studies I reviewed for this said it's just a contraindication. If you have a family history of pancreatitis, and I do, my mother has suffered greatly with it her whole life, as has her sister. Um, and I phenotypically really resemble them in that side of the family a lot. So I would be worried about that because there's about a 900% increase in pancreatitis when people do this, which makes sense, right? I mean, this is where all of these things, glucagon, insulin, GLP-1s are, um, produced. Um, Thyroid tumors, that there seems to be a little bit less, even things with kidneys. The more research that's come out, the more people taking these, it really seems like some of those more dire impacts are just not there. May have been just some statistical anomalies, but at least they're extremely low. Headaches, fatigue, lethargy, dry mouth. Some of these things to me are a little bit funny. Sure, dizziness, maybe because you're just eating less and you're getting hypoglycemic. Anxiety, maybe if it's impacting blood pressure, that kind of thing. But I think a lot of these side effects often just get swept into studies. They have to be reported. So if I started taking a drug in a study for 8 weeks, like the study I'm going to show you, and I got a cold sore. Well, hey, researcher, I got a cold sore. This, one of the side effects, maybe it causes cold sores. Well, we got to write it down. I don't know if there was any causal relationship there. So take that with a grain of salt. We know there are things that we can study and look at, and then some of these things are just not going to end up being there. But here's where we can look at a little bit greater, um, at least correlative value. Adverse events, almost 90%. So out of all the subjects taking these, 90% say I felt something I didn't like, something bad happened. Serious adverse events, almost 10%. Events leading to discontinuation, 7% of people taking these, it just said, man, it's not for me. Not digging it. Fatal events, I think one person died while taking this. Again, don't know if that's causal or not, so that's extremely low. But I've seen studies where, hey, we're doing a study on vitamin E. Somebody got killed in a tornado, so we're going to show that as a death due to vitamin E. I mean, that happens sometimes. Some of the things you really do need to worry about are nausea, diarrhea, constipation, dyspepsia, which is just stomach pain. So pretty high ranges there, all the way up to 44%. And I think that's one of the reasons why there's a ramping of dose. So typically there are three stages, and you go through those uh, per a protocol or per your tolerance. So a lot of people who get nervous about taking these, just need to understand you're starting with a third of the top end dose. And I have talked to people who don't have that much to lose because there are loopholes. You're not supposed to even be qualified to take these unless your BMI is over 30 or over 27 with some complications, some comorbidities. But especially with some of the online drug mills, like people are just getting it, right? Like even if you only want to lose 5 pounds, 10 pounds, like people have access to this. So I I recommend to some people who are in that category, if you're going to do this, just start with a small dose, and maybe you never need to increase. I think that's going to be part of how these are reviewed and further research goes on in terms of, are there minimum effective doses that we can tailor more to clients? Are there ways to cycle on, cycle off, and so forth? Because there are some very stonewall effects where, close to a year or so, people just stop getting results. And it is yet to be determined if that's just behaviorally, they're just bored. Like maybe they're getting those same interoceptive responses where hunger is blocked, they still feel full, but after a while, they just like to eat. It's like, so they just kind of eat their way through the mechanism of action. Or does it truly just through adaptive responses? Does it just stop working? Some of that is the research that we still have to get through. So some other things in there, that nasopharyngitis, respiratory infections, again, some of those I would just question, but we have to talk about them. So here's one of the updates. What I had to do to qualify what I wanted to share today, of course, it had to be current. We're talking about, these things have been approved just now for a couple of years for weight loss. A lot of people have reached the end of their goals. There are more people now who are going to be faced with coming off of these medications. So what's happening? So I can't say I found, the best research in the world. My grid for today was the most current research. So this particular one, treatment of obesity medications binding the GLP-1s, what is the current state of play? This particular study, as you can read in the top left column, is an expert opinion. So it's more of a position paper in pharmacotherapy. But I did include a couple things because I think they contextualize this discussion very well. The ongoing anticipation of long-term benefits, particularly sustained weight loss and cardiovascular outcomes, underscores the significance of future treatment algorithms for addressing the disease of obesity. So one of the big frames I want you to put around today's discussion is obesity is classified as a disease. Another fight that we were having in my quote lively discussion on social media, there's just a group of people from a personality psychology background that always wants to reduce everything down to will. If you just don't work hard enough. Hey, you homeless person, get a job, you lazy piece of shit. You can't lose weight and you want a medication. That's cheating. Just do the work, you stupid jerk. Like there are some people who are just so reductionistic, and it kills me because it shows such a lack of understanding of both biology and psychology. Uh, but obesity is a disease. I mean, some people just do not have the same neurological, biochemical, genetic constructs for being phenotypically lean. I think it's a whole different conversation, but you got to put that to the side at least for now. If you think obesity does not have predispositions in your genetics and so forth, you're just wrong. It does. So, what we need to look at in terms of public health is 8 billion people on the planet, 350 million or so in the US, all Western countries, very close behind the US in things like obesity and health status. If we want people to live longer and have higher qualities of life, and maybe even the conversation socioeconomically, use less healthcare dollars, make insurance premiums go down, make healthcare cost everybody less money, we have to be concerned about, how they live. Sure, I wish everybody, worked out 2 hours a day and ate apples and Greek yogurt and just took care of themselves, but it's not going to happen. Different discussion talking about how we help encourage those kind of things. But for right now, will these medications be a net positive for society? Getting back into some of these mechanisms of action, I just wanted you to know that this kind of stuff is out there. I'm not going to go through all of it. But like I said, from baroreceptor activity in the small intestine and the duodenum, the pyloric sphincter, and so forth, that's one thing. How you even perceive food from a cueing mechanism like the dopaminergic system, just your desire to consume food even if you're not hungry. There's just a lot that goes into how these medications work. But again, start with the premise that it's a peptide, naturally occurring amino acid group in your body. So now we just have to be worried about, is there a dosing effect that's just going to hurt us or that we can control and make it more favorable? So interestingly, what maybe some people don't know is that GIPs are akin to GLP-1s. It's a different type of peptide, and some medications like tirzepatide include that. And then I'm going to show you toward the end that there are a whole milieu of new drugs coming online that even put direct glucagon in the mix. Um, but these hormones that link the absorption of nutrients from the gastrointestinal tract with pancreatic hormone secretion, they are released in a meal setting after ingesting and absorbing calories, providing one of the physiological connections between eating and insulin release. Medications so these indications for use. Medications are licensed for patients, like I said, with a BMI greater than 30 or 27 and higher if they have other comorbidities. Patients are usually also asked by public and private payers to demonstrate they have tried comprehensive lifestyle interventions. Um, I have a friend who went online with one of these online drug mills. You see commercials for Hims and Hers where they're selling everything from Rogaine type products to Viagra and Cialis, and you just call this number. These drugs are there. I'm sure I'm not spilling the beans and telling a secret that nobody knows, but instead of just going to your family doctor and saying, "Hey, do you think this is an option for me?" This is how easy to access these things are. You can just call one of these companies. They'll probably do a video chat with you with a nurse practitioner, could even be a foreign medical service. Those Canadian pharmacies are big in this. They try and sell us all their drugs. We need to build a wall between us and Canada. Keep you guys out. Um, but you can just lie. Like you can just like they're in the business of selling these drugs. So the one thing I want to bring up here is if you're curious and you think these may work for you, I would still use your primary care physician because you want somebody to monitor and assess and discuss this with you. You can literally go online to one of these places, tell them about your weight, fictitiously make stuff up, and they'll just write you the script, get mailed to your house, and you're done. Don't do that. Just, get it the right way so that you can be monitored. So let me be a little bit more myopic now and zero in on where these GLP-1s came from because they're not just new. They're not out of the blue novel. We've used these for 20 years in the treatment of diabetes. And it was when some of the pharmaceutical companies started saying, well, geez, people are losing weight. Hey, that kind of makes sense. The insulin model of weight loss is a thing. So it kind of cascaded, of course, with Ozempic being the first one, going all the way back. First it was, of course, approved for diabetes, and then you get things like Wegovy, which is just a higher dose version. Then here came the tirzepatide, which is branded as Zepbound and Mounjaro, depending on whether you're using it for diabetes or weight loss. So a lot of these companies that already had the patents for diabetics, they just had to rerun trials, phase one, two, three, and just basically go through the same process with the same medication, but not just looking for diabetic control, looking for weight loss. So that kind of happened quickly, as you might expect. And then as the pharmaceutical company does, um, I'm not going to be totally cynical, but I hope you do hear the cynicism in my voice in that the greatest impetus for pharmaceutical companies is profit. Along the way, when you get further away from the board of directors and the CEO that's responsible to shareholders and profit, you do have biochemists and researchers and people who really care about their job. They're doing a good job. They want to create medications that are safe and effective. They want the breakthroughs. They want to help society and their fellow human beings. But at the same time, when things are being rushed for profiteering, of course, you're looking at it from two lenses. We're not going to be successful long if there are side effects and we lie and cheat and sneak things through, even though that happens. So I like to not be cynical and think that, there are enough ethical guidelines to govern their actions, but they are in a race against each other for getting patents. And if we know this compound works and our competitor pharmaceutical company has the patent, what can we do? What can we add to that? What kind of molecular manipulation can we spin on this to make it patentable to us? And hopefully it works just as well and doesn't kill anybody, or maybe it works even better and we're hitting home runs. But there is a massive race to these things. And so I always pump the brakes on my own personal expectations of something as well as just risking my own health or those people I care about, my family, my friends, my clients. So some of these things, when they first come out, you're never going to see me sign up to take it. I don't care what it is. I want to wait and see 100,000 people for 5 years of taking it, and then I'm going to look at some of the side effect data, and then I'll decide if that's for me. Like I'm always going to be that cautious. I would hope you are as well. But to my point, if you look at these bottom couple lines, um, Retatrutide, Cagrisema, I mean, they're running out of ways to name these things. All of these new medications are in trial that you've never heard of because they're not on the market yet. They're still in clinical trial. So there are going to be a lot of options, and it's going to be probably a little hard to even manage like what does what. So keep your eyes out for that. Um, here's what's interesting, and this is where I was going to stop my my talk today. Uh, and it's why I started discussing obesity as a disease. Listen to some of these summary statements from this particular study or position paper. The emphasis is shifting toward evaluating the impact of GLP-1, GIP agonist drugs on major adverse cardiovascular events and overall cardiovascular outcomes. As we traverse the landscape of weight management, it is crucial to recognize that the focus is expanding beyond weight loss alone. The era of advanced and nuanced drugs prompts us to consider a more holistic approach on overall health. The next chapter in the saga of GLP, GIP agonist drugs, a chapter that holds the promise of not just managing weight, but significantly improving overall health. So, what they're saying is okay, we know it's a cash grab. Anybody who wants to look better, who wants to lose weight, and maybe it's perfectly correlated to your desire for better health, yay for you. Whatever those motivations are, the people interested in this class of drugs from the altruistic clinical side, they just know it's going to save lives or they want it to save lives. We want to be able to manage it in the entire medical and health system to save lives, not just say that person lost 20 pounds. If somebody loses weight on these drugs, gains it all back, or they lose weight on these drugs, don't gain it all back, can we measurably say in 20, 30, 40, 50 years that we have extended life, that we've extended quality of life, that we have actually saved society money and pain and suffering? Because if it's just spinning our wheels and it's just a cash grab, a lot of people in that chain of command will lose interest. So this is where the future is now. It was diabetes first, great. It's like, whoa, this can help people lose weight. That's kind of cool. And then it's like, well, what does that mean? What is that truly going to get us down the road? And again, we are only a couple years into these, and so that data is just not here yet. But it kind of is because they're at least starting to look at it. Some groups are starting to collect that data. So that's where I can put my cynicism to bed a little bit and say, well, at least the people in charge of studying these, they don't necessarily have their hands in the cookie jar of just big pharma money, but they really do want to see what is happening here in the long term. So here's how we're going to answer that question. We know, and I was so happy to see Kevin Hall from the NIH a couple years ago just kind of waded through the muck of all of the hype and marketing of the weight loss industry. And through the NIH, he did a literature review that showed with all kinds of modalities and types of weight loss programming, 50% of people who lose weight regain it in 1 year. 80% of people who lose weight regain it within 2 years. Believe it or not, those aren't as bad as some of the marketing hype stats I've seen. If 80% of people lose weight or who lose weight regain it in 2 years, it's not a great stat. I mean, a lot of us on this call, a lot of people who watch the playback are coaches, we're in this industry in some way. We want it to be 100%. I want to look at all of my clients in the eye and say, you're going to have such an educational experience. You're going to learn so much. We're going to have so much interaction and experiential touch points that there is no way you're going to ever regain your weight. You're going to learn how to do this and you're going to love it. And it's going to change your life. Am I better than 20% success rate? We've actually studied some internal stats and we are, but it's not 100%. But that is the mark that interventions like this have to beat and hopefully substantially to make sure that they have some ongoing success. So let's get into now as a standard. Here's where I was going to leave us and move into a discussion. Can we do that? Can GLP-1s beat this? Because as I tell all of my friends and clients and family members who are interested, whenever somebody says, "Hey Joe, come on, man, should I take it? Would it help? I've been really struggling with the last 20 pounds, or, I've been working really hard and I've lost the first 30 or 40. Could I do this? It'll make it easier." And I have to tell them, going all the way back to the mechanisms of action, it's just going to make you less hungry. It doesn't magically change how your body interacts with food. It's not going to change your metabolism. Matter of fact, you're probably going to see some metabolic suppression because you're going to be so less hungry that you eat less and you could get into maladaptive responses metabolically. All of that aside, we know that you can lose a high amount of muscle mass because you're losing weight so rapidly unless you train. Then if you're training, doing some resistance work, that can mitigate almost all muscle loss. So, we're getting some benefits. I'm putting some guardrails around this that make it look good. It is an option. It's safe for most people, especially if you're really monitoring those side effects. As long as you're working out, you're going to mitigate bone loss and muscle loss. But when you get to the end, even though this is a great tool to give you less hunger, when you get to the end, that normal hunger as you perceive it will be there. All of the benefits to this go away when you stop taking it. So if you want a tool to get you there, fantastic. But you got to be ready for a fight at the end. Because if you have not been successful at losing weight to this point without it, and you have the genetics psychologically, neurologically, physically, physiologically, it's still probably going to be difficult even on the other side of this. So how can we get there even using these as tools? Will it increase our proficiency better than this 80% recidivism? Well, guess what? I found a study that used those parameters. 80% of people regain their weight back within 2 years. This study took 166 people, I think. Yep, 166 people. And they said, okay, we're going to do an 8-week intervention. Everybody goes through this nutrition counseling, this supervised exercise, personal training work. You're going to get a GLP-1. Everybody's going to get 8 weeks of this just, platinum level intervention. Then you're going to get put into one of four groups. You're going to all continue with this weight loss maintenance plan. Like we're giving you macros, diets, this kind of thing. You're going to get, all of that, but you're going to be in a group that has supervised exercise. So the GLP-1 intervention's over, but you get that supervised exercise for the next year, or you get that, or I'm sorry, or you get just the GLP-1. So now you're going to continue. You had 8 weeks of the GLP-1. Now you're going to get it for another year, or you get the exercise plus the GLP-1, or you get a placebo. Okay. So everybody gets 8 weeks, massive intervention. Then it's either placebo, you get nothing except the weight loss counseling. You get exercise alone, you get GLP-1 alone, or you get exercise plus GLP-1. They did that for a year. Then they got nothing. It's like, okay, study's over. Thanks. Then a year later, so now we're at the 2 year mark, they come back to see who's regained weight and who hasn't, what their health status is. So you could not have a better intervention study to look at that question. Who will do better with these GLP-1s? In what way, if we can pick one of these four, or does everybody crash and burn, as some of my friends on social media cynically say? So I picked out as many of the visuals as I could because they are actually really good. But body weight change from randomization all the way through the 2 year mark. So of course, look at this first line here. It's just completely synchronistic. I mean, everybody in those first 8 weeks, um, they all kind of moved down to this change point. Um, that's where it was just statistically shown to be kind of the average. I think, let me go back here for a second. I don't think I told you guys this. Maybe you kind of read through it. Um, they lost 13.1 kilograms, so almost 30 pounds in 8 weeks. That's how powerful these GLP-1s can be. So now the placebo alone group, they kind of creep up here and man, they've gained some weight back. This is how much weight they've gained in kilos. That looks like it's just above 6, maybe 7. You'll see those numbers on the next couple slides. They've gained about 7 kilos back of the 13. Where's this blue one here? That's the GLP-1 alone. So if you took the GLP-1 alone, you even regained a little bit more than just the placebo. I mean, pretty negligible. But then you see all of a sudden here, the exercise group, they didn't regain as much. And then the people who had the exercise and GLP-1, all the way here. But let's look at this mark here first, though, at 52 weeks, at the 1 year mark. The people who were using just the GLP-1, they they had kind of plateaued, right? I mean, this is only another kilogram or 2 kilograms. So even extending into that, doing the medication alone, after the 8 weeks, they really didn't lose that much. Hmm. Exercise plus that, they definitely they kept losing. They lost a little bit more. They lost another 4 or so kgs. So, I think motivation comes into this. I'm not sure when you're getting 166 people together, how many people are really gung ho, or how many people are just saying, "Hey, look, I can make a couple $100 being a part of this study." So it's a broad swath of humanity, but in epidemiological research, that's good. We want to see just a little bit of everybody. But man, when you look at this back end, there's a pro and a con. So again, cynicism first. Everybody starts gaining weight back. Everybody. Exercise and GLP-1 gained the least amount back. Exercise alone second. Then kind of the placebo and the GLP-1 alone were kind of, I'm sorry, or the placebo and the GLP-1 alone were almost tied. So it looks like, man, after 2 years, once they stopped any intervention at all at the 2 year mark, a year without anything, everybody's regaining. But they lost 13 here, the highest one over here. They still maintained at least half, sometimes more. I would hope that's better because if you look at this statistically, it aligns with the fact that after year 2, you get into year 3, 4, 5, a certain portion of those people do keep gaining their weight back so that an awful lot of people at year 5 post intervention, not from this study, but just in general, they've gained all their weight back. There's a really high portion of people who do that. So the trends are going in that direction, but at least we see some difference here in that exercise became important. And as you would hope, in the details of the study, they found that people who were actually trained in exercise, they didn't just get this 8 week intervention with training, but they had a personal trainer for a full year that became a little bit more habitual and they maintained it. And so those are the people who are likely going to, keep that weight loss, um, you know, going at least a little bit further. So change in weight regain from week 0 to week 104, the 2 year mark. So this is just another representation of what we just saw. The placebo group and the GLP-1, very similar. The exercise group plus having the GLP-1 for an entire year instead of 8 weeks. Those people with then a year of nothing, they still maintained more of their progress. And I would argue that some of having that GLP-1 for that long, instead of just 8 weeks, this was a group that had it for the full year and they were exercising. There's just a lot of time for habits to be formed, for people to see some of the value in those things, how you look, how you feel, uh, improving longevity and so forth. So by the end of this, you're going to see that their conclusion and mine are certainly aligned with we have to have multiple modality intervention types. Somebody who just goes to the pharmacy, goes to their family doctor, and gets this drug, doesn't make any other lifestyle changes, you're probably going to be one of those people who regains all your weight. Um, so their actual body weight, so now not just weight change, but this is where the placebo group was getting back up a little bit higher. Again, you see the exercise plus GLP-1 all the way extended out here to the 2 year mark, fared better. I just put these in there for historical. If you can go back and watch this playback and you want to really pause and look at some of these graphs, you can. But I think you have the picture there. One of the things that I thought was really interesting, and that's why I put these two side by side, is that when you look at just weight regain pulled out into two different variable groups, one being the people who exercise or the impact of exercise, and then the impact of the GLP-1, um, these things parallel each other in trend line direction. I mean, you can see once we got past this initial 8 week intervention, and then, this group was receiving no exercise, whether they were on the placebo, whether they were getting the GLP-1 or not, any of the people who did not exercise, they just trended up faster. But the people who did exercise, even though they had less weight regain, the line is identical in trajectory, which means the GLP-1 still does have an impact. I mean, there's no doubt about that. This is a medication that works. Um, but then again, when you get to this next one, then you have to say, well, yes, Joe, but because here's the line where I can say, yes, that medication works. But when you leave the medication behind at this point, it kind of races right up to the rest. So the cautionary tale is this: we have both truths that can look to be opposite, but as we often say, science isn't either or, it's how and when. These medications work. Uh, I'm not going over the dozens and dozens and dozens of studies. Matter of fact, I think I had them listed over here. Um, did I? Let me find this. They're right over here. If you guys are interested, some of the named clinical trials that these pharmaceutical companies went through, if you just look up the SCALE trial, the STEP trial, the SURMOUNT trial, the SELECT trial, the REDUCE trial, these are all acronyms. Like the SCALE means satiety and clinical adiposity, liraglutide evidence of non-biased, blah, 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 blah. You can look these up and you can look at the exact details. Like how were these medications against other modalities like a placebo or something else? There are some tremendous, tremendous studies that show how powerful these medications are. But just like to everybody's dismay should be, held, that it's not a miracle. It doesn't change your physiology forever. You can get to these points where you are having this massive impact. You're getting look at this weight loss, 28 pounds in 8 weeks. Oh my gosh, if we can just keep that going, stay motivated, rah, rah, rah. I can lose 50 pounds, 100 pounds. I can keep going. I can keep going. And it's great. I'm not feeling the side effects. I've got no contraindications. This is amazing. I'm reducing my chance of cardiovascular disease. I'm healthy. I'm happy. Everything's great. And then all of a sudden you get out here and it's like, oh, wait a second. Now that I'm not on the medication, it's all coming back. And the trend lines will show that for a lot of people, it's all going to come back. So what are we going to do? How do we use something that's so promising and powerful, and yet once we are done, the impact just may go away? Again, we have some great health and medical people on this. I'm gonna see who all joined us here. Dr. Kevin Brunacini. Dr. Souders jumped in. Um, a physician. We have Austin Kiergaard, a registered dietitian. What do you guys think the answer is? How are we going to make sure that these things are a net positive? Feel free to just jump in. Don't wait for me. I'm going to stop the screen share here.
All right, I'll jump because probably I got to jump off faster than the rest of the folks. Um, one of the things that just jumped out to me comes from our work in CPU D1 group. So our contrast prep university, we have people who are losing weight for contests, right? And that is a rather elite sort of weight loss protocol, and that pushes normal physiology boundaries. And I think that we're all aware of that. But what is taught to those competitors among the things that they learn and the support they have, and that I don't see in these studies, is how to manage hunger. And that's what GLP-1s seem to do, is they manage hunger for you. And I thought really interesting to me looking at the exercise slide there. Exercise can make you hungrier. And so there's a lot of people that actually gain weight when they start exercising because it makes them hungrier. And I think that's very well documented, and that's just, a given for a certain percentage of the population. And so you see that the folks um, who have or don't have the GLP-1. I think the only thing that's a difference on that exercise slide is, when does the regain start when you get rid of that hunger suppression, which is physiological. So how these studies are being done is, I don't see a study, and there would be great to have a study if one of the variables was not just simply the low calorie diet, counseling and exercise and support and all that stuff, but also specific hunger management strategies, which I don't see that anybody is actually really addressing those. And they are specific techniques, and I don't know that they're particularly understood or appreciated or utilized in the normal clinical scenario.
Really good observation, Jen, and you always bring something great in that I just miss speaking about. And you're right. For those, even somebody who just is successfully, maybe not competing in a physique or performance sport, but they have the genetics to gain weight, they have the behavioral aptitude to gain the weight, lifestyle, environmental, whatever it is, they gain that weight. When they lose, they still now have the option. I have proven to myself I can lose, so I can manage my hunger. Why don't I do it long term? And I think a super great control group or study group is that contest prep physique sport group, because I know, having been a pro bodybuilder for 20 years, you do everything you have to survive. You experiment. Well, if I eat this
Yeah.
food at this time of the day and this amount, I can sustain, my satiety a little bit longer. And if I do this, I do this. Like, we do whatever it takes. And those are skills that you have to go through experientially. You have to learn. So really, really, really good point.
Yeah, and I think it would also be helpful too to see some of these studies looking at body composition rather than just simple weight. That's
You know,
another
they
factor.
actually did, Dr. Souders. If you looked up that particular study,
They did that.
I left a lot out because it
Okay.
was a a very detailed study.
Yeah, because that's key. And I think really, when we're looking at these people, another thing is maybe personality. Um, since we know now that there's some interest in utilizing these GLP-1 inhibitors for potentially treating alcohol use disorder and other compulsive behaviors like, gambling and shopping and other things that are either use disorders or, kind of border on them. And again, there's that psychological counseling, um, group support, therapeutic support kind of thing for managing those behaviors. So I think it's a fascinating thing. But the GLP ones, people have to realize that they don't manage everything, and what they don't manage primarily is your ability to learn how to manage hunger because they do that for you. And then as a result, when that's gone, you don't have the skills to manage your urges and your cravings. And so that could facilitate rebound even more.
Mhm. Before I bring in Kevin and Austin, I do just want to have on the record of this conversation because I'm so happy it turned to specific hunger management techniques. We did a research review one time showing that using continuous glucose monitoring was able to teach adults and children in under 8 weeks. You know, this is how you feel when you think you're hungry. There's still food in your stomach, your blood sugar is still rising because the food is still in your small intestine. And we're monitoring, we're looking at your blood glucose levels right here. So we're starting to teach people to correlate. This is how I feel. I don't need to eat. Like, I think I'm hungry. I kind of feel hungry, but my physiology is saying I don't need to eat. Let me wait till I get down here. Now I need food. Oh, I got it. And within 8 weeks, children and adults, one group 80%, one group 90%, great accuracy at predicting that. And then without any other intervention, without tracking macros, without a meal plan, without drugs, the group who did that, who went through that biofeedback training, they went on to lose weight and keep it off just because they learned how to interoceptively understand those hunger cues. So that's one way. And there are other ways of really truly looking at, hunger, such as there's just a psychological intertwining of your perception of hunger, just like we talk about Dr. Souders a lot with chronic pain and anxiety and stress and so forth, where it's like, oh my gosh, I'm so hungry. Oh my gosh, I gotta eat. Oh my gosh, I'm so hungry. Versus like, oh, I'm hungry. Great. I'm on a diet. I'm trying to lose weight. That means I'm losing weight. It's working. I'm going to just sit here in this hunger. I'm going to think about it in a way that I can use it positively. I'm going to drink some water, distract myself. It just goes away. Then I'm not even hungry for another hour or two, but just reframing it psychologically is a lifelong skill that I think is critical for people who are going to sustain weight loss.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember we discussed that other study with the behaviors and it was fascinating. Yeah, and I mean like for competitors, we learn very quickly the difference between a stomach sensation that's a lot less meaningful than, oh yeah, when I went from sitting to standing, the world kind of started to get black.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Little fuzziness. Dr. Brunacini, any thoughts from your perspective?
It certainly helps to see obesity as a chronic disease, no differently than anything else, hypertension, dyslipidemia, etc. That there are, I don't want to say cases and to minimize the number of actual patients that will need meds, but there are cases where this is a medication like GLPs are going to be lifelong, and that's you know we'll see. It's always dependent, it's always contextual, but that might be the case because of the chronicity of obesity, no differently than hypertension. You can, it still is baseline or maintaining things, keeping things even keel, but um, I still should not. It's there's still a responsibility of the patient hopefully still manage it the best they can, however that is. If that's reducing sodium for a context of hypertension, cool. That will certainly help in addition to antihypertensive medications on top of that. But same can be said with obesity. So it's a multi-pronged, always is. But there's by shifting obesity into a label of chronicity, then it's not just sheer willpower. So there are those where it might be helpful, and there is some actual positive benefits of long-term usage independent of weight loss, which is that could, I guess, that will certainly help with that argument. But um, I'm all for it. It's a tool in understanding the limitations. It's a pill, so there will always be side effects, and understanding that from an informed decision making and being up to date with the PCP and just being responsible patient in terms of here's what's going on, here's what I'm feeling, and etc. And just having that open dialogue with the clinician. I mean, that's ideal. That's hardly ever happens, but that would be the ideal case. And if you need to come off of it because you're successful or whatever reason, then cool. And therefore, and if you're still at a risk of or still struggling with obesity, then what's our next option? Just like hypertension, what is our scaling or scaffolding next pill or behavior, whatever is going on? And that's where needs to be a shared decision making, patient centered type of collaboration, and just to help them just help them in the context of what's best. So, yeah.
Yeah, another great point with just, what if somebody wants to or has to or chooses to take this forever? Um, Remember, they were using these for diabetes long term. It wasn't just let's lose 50 pounds and get off of it. So I know there has to be some data there. We are at higher doses and we're starting to combine things like the GIPs and so forth. But at the end of the day, the goal again, from a public health perspective, is to save lives, improve quality of life. And so, just like somebody taking a statin or a blood pressure lowering medication or a thyroid medication or a type 1 diabetic taking insulin, look, if this is your lot in life, and like you said, Kevin, even if you can behaviorally assist yourself, do exercise, do eat better, do these things. But if this is just what you need to lose 100 pounds and keep it off, then that may be a lot better than just yo-yoing back and forth and ultimately failing. And so I think that's again going to be part of that long-term look at these.
Yeah, I was just going to mention something on that basis, and yeah, it nailed it perfectly.
Austin, I don't know if you can speak, but as a dietitian, any thoughts? And if you can't, that's fine. He may be tied up.
I had
Okay,
to
Kevin.
step out for a second, and then I just came back in. But I think I was catching at the tail end. We were talking along the lines of more um, better management in hunger cues. Is that kind of where you guys were ending things, or did it go a different direction here? I apologize.
Just curious from your perspective as somebody who works with hospital patients with all kinds of diagnoses and so forth, if you have an opinion on what we're seeing so far in general with the GLPs, as somebody asked me on social media, are you advocating these, Joe, or are you not? And I kind of took Kevin's perspective. Well, it's a great tool. Like if you need that tool, use that tool. I have a barn full of tools. I use the right tool when I need that tool. Doesn't mean I advocate for them, as in I'm a cheerleader and I'm trying to get everybody on them. But do you have any concerns, pros, cons, anything to list?
Yeah, it's a similar thing. It's a tool. I've been asked similar questions because of being a dietitian and being, working with clinical patients and stuff like that. It's different for when I see patients on these GLP-1s. We have patients 4, 5, 600 pounds sometimes in our hospitals. And I mean, they need multiple people to move them. There's some people that we see in the hospital, they haven't moved in years. So I can understand a perspective of people trying to get these individuals to lose some weight quickly to try to improve certain health markers. I can understand that tool. I was at our physique conference, which is basically the world's largest dietitian conference up in Minneapolis, and this was one of the topics that were discussed and kind of where everything has been sitting at with GLP-1s. And a lot of what was discussed is what you've covered already today in some of this research, Joe. And the biggest concern is people using them in a way where they think it is that new magic tool. And they don't prepare for what's to come afterwards, just like a lot of other different situations when it comes to weight loss. Is they help, manage the hunger, kind of like Jen had said. I think that's might have been when I stepped out. But at the same time, when people stop taking them, that's where we start seeing, problems, weight gain, other issues, things of that nature. So yeah, I always advocate more for people to, for trying to lose weight, to having I call it, I guess, a care team, because I'm used to care teams, but, that could be your dietitian or your nutrition coach, could be a mental health coach, could be your primary care physician. So when you're getting over your weight loss journey, you are in a spot to be prepared for more success. Because we just know, as some of the information you provided earlier, most people gain all of their weight back, whether it's coming off a GLP-1, whether it's a weight loss journey. So I try to talk to my patients and my clients to prepare for more of the after of their process versus the during.
Great. All right. Well, we are at the top of the hour. See you, Jen. So I'm going to wrap this up just by reiterating your biggest point there, Austin, which is it's even great to do some prehab work with this. I have a client right now who is going to be moving in this direction to take a GLP-1, but she's already lost 20 or 30 pounds. She's really improved her diet. She's gotten some support in terms of methodologically how to eat and how to get all these things in line, building a lot of good habits. Now go on the medication with that momentum and know that you're going to have to continue those great lifestyle modifications when you come off. Because again, great tool so far, maybe a little bit high on the risk sides for some people's potential side effects, but you're going to gain weight back if you're not ready when you come off of these, if you're not ready to maintain some of that. So would love to see you guys when I post this on social media. If you guys have any questions, comments, anybody who watches this on the playback, feel free to keep the conversation going, and we'll see you next time in the Flexible Dieting Institute Research Review Series. See you guys.